In this whiteboard session, we are going to explore the connections between proposals, payment plans, and workflows. In this workflow, we're starting things off by sending out a proposal, contract, and invoice once the workflow has started. Then we are sending out a reminder to fill out the proposal if they haven't done so after 3 days. And then we're archiving the project if they have not submitted the proposal after 10 days have passed since they originally received it. Next, we have a thank you for your deposit email that is set to go out after they have paid their 50% deposit using the trigger after invoice installment paid, which is watching the payment plan that is added at the top. We'll discuss more on that later. And then finally, we are starting the next phase of the process by adding a start a workflow action at the bottom of this workflow once all previous actions have been completed. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss here is what happens on the back end if you have a proposal or payment plan added to a workflow. Anytime that you have a proposal or payment plan or both added to a workflow, the moment that this workflow gets applied into a new project, it will create your primary invoice inside the project. It does not matter if you have include invoice selected in the proposal settings. Just having a proposal in the workflow will create that primary invoice immediately. So from a business process and workflow perspective, you should only have your proposal and payment plan getting applied into your project when you're ready for an invoice to be created. This is where building workflows in phases can help greatly, rather than building one long workflow. Which leads us to our next 2 points, which are, where should the payment plan go then? In the proposal settings or the workflow settings, and why? If you are planning on sending out your proposal through the workflow like we're doing here, you should put your payment plan in the workflow settings and remove it from your proposal settings. If you have your payment plan in both the workflow settings and the proposal settings, on the back end, the system will see 2 separate payment plans and cancel each other out, which can lead to a workflow error like you see here. The reason that we recommend adding it to the workflow settings instead of the proposal settings is because only by adding the payment plan to the workflow settings are you able to utilize the workflow trigger after invoice installment paid. If we were to remove the payment plan from this workflow and then look at the deposit email that is set to go out, you will see that the after invoice installment paid trigger is now gone, and you are only able to use the trigger after invoice paid in full. So by adding the payment plan to the workflow settings, you now have an extra trigger at your disposal. So if you have to choose between one or the other, that's why we recommend the workflow settings instead of the proposal settings. Just a quick disclaimer. If you are not using workflows to send your proposal and still need to use a payment plan, then you should add your payment plan to the proposal settings. So to recap with this whiteboard session, number 1, the first time a workflow gets applied that has a payment plan or proposal in it, or both, your primary invoice gets created. Again, this is a great reason why building your process in workflow phases is a better option than one long workflow, because you have more control over when that invoice is getting created in the project. Number 2, make sure you do not have your payment plan in both the workflow and proposal settings as this will cause an error. And number 3, only by adding a payment plan to your workflow settings are you able to use the trigger after invoice installment paid.